I'm, I'm going to jump right into this. Just a little bit of background. So I teach at Central Washington University at the Ellensburg campus, and we're an IT management department. We have specializations in cybersecurity, data analytics, project management, those to name a few. And I have taught at Central for going on my 13th year. And the topic that I'm going to discuss with you guys for the short period of time I have, I'm pulling from information in a junior level class that I teach, information security, ethics, and privacy. And I teach this class both on campus in a hybrid model and online. So being with you guys remotely is familiar enough to me. I love being in front of students, and I see I have a room full of you, so that's good, future cybersecurity professionals. And so I'm going to jump right into this. And I always like to start with, when I talk to students about ethics, about the importance of students having an understanding of their own personal ethics. And I won't have a chance to, ask questions and get answers from you. So I just want you to think about for yourself as a future young professional, where you get your own moral compass from, where you learned your ethics from. And I always ask this question, and I tend to get some of the same responses, which are atypical of this, and that's, I learned my ethics, students will say, from my home, from my parents, from my family, and that's very normal. As you grow and you get into the K through 12 system and you start gaining friends and peers and doing activities outside of your home, some of those ethics that you learn in your home are challenged in some ways. And then you have friends that you gain and their ethical or moral compass is in line with yours, very normal. And then, as many of you are, and my students here on campus, there's a shift in your life when you leave home. And for many of you, it's the first time you leave home for an extended period of time, and you live in a residence hall. You have maybe some friends that come to school with you that you went to high school with, but a lot of your social network are new friends. And again, and even in a bigger way, your ethics that you learned in your home and maybe develop some in the K through 12 environment. And I always like to say, because for many students who get their first job, and I'm going to dovetail into when you get into your careers, your personal ethics, again, get challenged. Things happen with your friends where you go, oh, that's, not really in line with my belief systems, my moral compass. You may have a conversation with them about it. You may choose to discontinue that friendship based on those challenges. In your work as a college student, many of you are at WSU, many of our students at CWU, you may see things happen on a college campus with the groups you're in, maybe even with CySER, where you go, yeah, what CySER, their values and their beliefs, this is in line with what I want to do. And it wouldn't be a surprise for me to hear, being a faculty member of a large institution, that there are times where the institution's beliefs aren't completely in line with mine. I always like to open this talk with that reality of all of our lives, that it's never my goal for students, for me to say and teach, you need to know your personal ethics and that I want you to change them necessarily, but it's really important for you to know where you stand as an individual and what your ethical belief system is. And so on the slide that you see, it gives a basic definition. Cybersecurity, right? That practice of protecting computer systems, networks, data, all the information that flows through, which is in every aspect of all of our lives and in every business world. And it's to protect from theft, damage, and or unauthorized access. And then ethics within cybersecurity, when you think about that, when you think about the totality, that everything we do, like this right here, you're listening to me live from Ellensburg through a system where this information is being transferred to you and we're recording it. You think about your financial world, you think about your educational records, and then you think about those career paths that you want to go into where you may end up being a cybersecurity professional. Everything we do has to do with data and where that data is stored and how that data is transferred. And so ethics for future cybersecurity professionals, and I stress this point for my students who are going to be cybersecurity professionals, ethics is paramount. And now with AI and how AI is becoming a main part of all of our lives in many different ways and many different systems, it's going to be even more important. I always like to say, is what you're seeing really real? Is it what you really intend for it to be, or is it being changed in some way due to AI? And is that ethical? So ethics within cybersecurity is paramount when looking at the totality of the work done within the cybersecurity world. And why does it matter? Why do cybersecurity ethics matter? Well, I believe at my core as an individual, as a faculty member at Central, ethics do matter. But when talking about cybersecurity, the protection, I'm going to go back for a second. When looking at the protection of computer systems and networks from theft, damage, or unauthorized access, they matter a lot, and they matter for you as a future cybersecurity professional because you're going to be the one doing the work of protecting that information. But it's also important for you to understand as a future professional that you're going to have access. You're probably in a lot of ways going to have more access than most, right? To ensure that we're protecting that information, you have to know where it is, you have to know where it resides, you have to know the different places that it goes. So as a cybersecurity professional, ethics for you, in my view, in an organization, in an institution, whether it's a public or private entity, when thinking about cybersecurity, it makes me think of risk management. I have some background in risk management. You have the most access as a future cybersecurity professional. If you're doing ethical hacking, obviously ethics matter. But whatever you do in the cybersecurity realm, ethics are going to matter more for you as a professional than most. And you can see some of the bullet points. I'm not going to read the screen verbatim because that would just bore you. But I always like to just point out, when I have my device right here, and all of you probably have your devices. These devices hold our whole lives. When thinking about our laptops and our desktops and all of the things that we do, technology is everywhere in our lives. It's everywhere in our personal lives. And I always say to students, well, here we go right here. This is a real life example. If the internet goes down, how much can we do? Not much. I mean, literally, I wouldn't be able to do this for you today. I couldn't do the work that I do on a daily basis as a college professor. That work, I could do a basic lecture, but outside of that, grading, accessing textbooks, accessing all the different tools that we need in a higher education system, we couldn't do that. And then you start looking at all the different sectors of our life, technology is everywhere. It's literally in every facet of our lives. So that for you as a future cybersecurity professional, ethical behavior is going to be critical to doing what? To protecting that information, but also to make sure that you do those key things to keep that information safe, to keep that information that you are privy to, that you have knowledge to, safe from those who don't have a need or access to. And then when you think about the current trends of attacks, I pull up the map, and you guys know how to do this. You can pull up a map from any of the reputable sites showing all the attacks that are happening right now. But the sophistication of these attacks are getting stronger and stronger. So for you as a cybersecurity professional, for sure, you're going to need those technical skills. We need you smart young professionals learning those technical skills, but also I want you at your core as an individual to keep those ethics at the forefront of all the work you do too. So when talking about ethics, I always like to give the the example, and it's kind of a basic example because you talk about, what keeps people honest. You look at ethical frameworks and principles. This isn't, I encourage you, I'm glad I remembered to say this. If you have room in your program, and if you've done this already, good for you. Take a philosophy class. Take a specific ethics class. Hopefully it's part of your degree program. But I always say, if you have room for some credits, take a philosophy class. This is where you can learn about these different ways that we gain our values and we determine our moral compass. And you can look at the ones on the screen, and I'm going to give you the example of two types of honesty. And it's important for you to understand this in the work that you do as a cybersecurity professional. This comes from my time in risk management. Is generally human behavior is controlled, how we keep people in check, how we keep ethics in check. Is, there's what you maybe have heard as cash register honesty. And you might think, well, what is that? Well, what that means, if an individual's cash register honest, they're not going to say they work for an employer and they have access to money or, files that have money. Cash register honesty is, I'm not going to take something from that person or that employer because I don't want to get caught. That can help keep people in line. And in fact, that's why a lot of policies and laws are created to keep people in line, to keep people within the bounds of the laws, that laws and codes that in some ways has to do with ethics. And then there's people who they're not going to take money from the register or from the system. They're not going to steal from their employer, whatever the case may be. They're not going to divulge information simply because it's wrong. So when you look at the three basic types, and it's that first bullet there, that first one is that consequentialist ethics, utilitarianism. I'm not going to, or duty-based ethics. I'm not going to do what's wrong because, well, it's the right thing to do. Or there's the type of honesty or ethics that, I'm not going to do what's wrong because I don't want to get caught. And I'm not here to determine what's better or worse or what's right or wrong. That's for the individual to decide. But for you as an individual, I'm going to keep saying this. It's important for you to know where you stand on these issues. And I always say this to my students who want to be cybersecurity managers. You're probably going to end up being one, even if you don't want one. I have many students who end up being managers of others. It's important to know your own, and it's important to have information on ethics so that you can understand the behavior of others. Our ethical beliefs, I'm going to read this one, guide our decision-making in cybersecurity. I always say to students, those habits that you're cementing for yourself right now as a young adult in your late teens or early 20s, they're going to translate right into the workplace. So how you're behaving now when it comes to ethical decision making, it's not just magically going to change and shift to be better or worse when you go into the workplace. It'll actually be pretty similar for you as an individual and the decisions you make. This may be familiar to you, depending on where you're at in your degree program. When looking at cybersecurity, ethical principles are confidentiality, integrity, availability, and accountability. And it's called not the CIA, the government CIA, but the CIA triad when looking at cybersecurity. That's how we help new professionals understand the ethical principles within cybersecurity, and that helps to inform that ethical behavior. So that confidentiality, we have to keep that information that is supposed to be confidential. And how do we do that? Well, access and control, policy and procedure, law, ethical standards for different industries have different codes of ethics that guide them. The integrity, is the information that we have accurate, right? And organizations have a responsibility to ensure that that's happening. Availability, who has access to the information? Should they have access to it? Is it available to those that need access? And then accountability, and that's where you're going to hear me say this a couple times. Policy and procedure. As boring as it sounds, many of you will be involved in the creation of, the maintaining of policy and procedure in this realm. And that's how we hold people accountable. That's how we ensure that we're acting ethically within organizations. Privacy and data protection. There's, I hear people say, and there's part of me that's like, yeah, okay, fine. But there's people that say, well, all my information's out there, and so I'm not really worried about, whether someone sees it or not. And it's kind of this laissez-faire attitude toward privacy. There are some who think just because someone, uses a Tor as their primary browser, well, they must be doing something wrong. No, maybe they just have a right to privacy and they can use that browser if they choose to. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone's doing something wrong. So individual privacy rights are critically important and something that's talked about a lot for employees, for students, for organizations, for whole entities. We have to understand that individual privacy rights should be something that we're talking about. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. That's kind of a global thing when talking about data, the storage of data, access to data, deletion of data, whatever the case may be. So there are some significant challenges when talking about ethics and data breaches, surveillance, and the collection and use of personal data. Organizations have to be mindful of the treasure trove, the massive amount of data that they're collecting on their users. And this goes in every industry. If you just think about the last time you went to the grocery store, you went online and you bought something, how much information that we consumers give to entities. And so then the question is, well, who has the responsibility to ensure that information is kept safe? If I go back one slide, who has the responsibility for that CIA triad? Well, organizations do. Organizations have a significant responsibility when it comes to individual privacy rights. And again, I go back to just because you can doesn't mean you should. That's kind of one of those ethical dilemmas. And I think that's the first time in this talk, and maybe I've been a little remiss in this, is that ethical dilemmas are where you will be faced with challenges with your individual moral compass, with your individual ethics as a new cybersecurity professional. But ethical dilemmas are where we have to come together as individuals and organizations and, dare I say, make the right decision, right? And how do you do that? Well, you do that through these ethical principles within cybersecurity, and you have good policy in place to ensure that you're keeping data safe. And we don't have to go far. You can go on EFF.org and you can read about the latest scandal or controversy where individual privacy rights were violated. It happens all the time. And I always like to note it's not just private industry, it's public entities, it's governmental industries who make very poor decisions, unethical decisions when it comes to individual privacy rights. And then hacking and unauthorized access, right? And this is a group that you guys understand that there's a distinct difference between white hat and black hat, right? We at Central Washington University, we have our ethical hacking club, and they love doing what they do. And I encourage those students to learn all they can, right? So that they know what the bad guy's doing. With that said, ethics needs to be at the forefront of what's happening in ethical hacking clubs or ethical hacking groups or organizations that have red and blue teams, whatever the case may be. We have to consider the ethics of what we're doing. Just because I'm a white hat, I can talk, ethic or hacker, is what I'm doing ethical? Should I be doing it? What's the intent of what I'm doing? And then, of course, malicious hacking is unethical in all of its courses. But then again, you think, well, what about situations where It's almost a whistleblower situation. In fact, I can't think of his name, but I think he just got an extension for his asylum wherever he's at. Forgive me for not thinking of his name, but he was all over the news several years ago for leaking classified information, and the United States wants him back here and they want to hold him accountable. And there are many who say, no, what he did was the right thing. He's almost in that whistleblower category, almost that white hat category. Well, there are also many who believe, no, that was malicious. He should not have done what he did. So those considerations when talking about that unauthorized access to computer systems and networks, there can be debate on that. There are still companies, and I say this in the year 2024, who hesitate to let their users, their consumers, whoever it is that they have their data on, that they fail to disclose vulnerabilities. And the unfortunate reality is now government entities and even organizations in different sectors of the business world are requiring companies, government entities to disclose these things. That's what ends up happening. We try as a society, depending on where the society is, let's let people do the right thing. Well, when people don't do the right thing, responsible vulnerability disclosure and its importance to cybersecurity, right? We need to let people know, hey, this is the risk and this is what we're doing to mitigate that risk. But many organizations and many companies don't do this. They do this later than sooner, when they should do this sooner than later. And you, as the soon-to-be cybersecurity professional, you might find yourself in a position with an organization that is going to challenge your ethics because you might be told, no, don't say anything, don't do anything. And then what I always say to students, know what you're signing up for with organizations. Know what the policy is. What is that organization's code of ethics? And do they stand by that, right? But then there are also those ethical considerations that need to be considered in disclosing whatever those vulnerabilities are. There are many organizations and groups that have what are called bug bounty programs, right? Of incentivizing ethical behavior to help identify those vulnerable areas within systems. And those can be highly beneficial to avoid some of those pitfalls that I just talked about. This is the new battlefield. We have a pretty strong ROTC program at Central, and I know across our state, all of our universities have strong ROTC programs. I'm a military veteran myself. I'm aging myself a bit, but this was mid-'80s during the Cold War era. And I remember the technological advances we were having then had nothing to do with what we are literally in right now. And it's the modern battlefield. The modern battlefield is not soldiers on the ground, fighting it out with weapons. It's not tanks. It's not even the most modern Air Force. It's cyber warfare. And it's happening right now. We can see it in our nation just with ransomware attacks on government entity. I always say little old Ellensburg, the city of Ellensburg, they had a situation a few years ago where their system was attacked and it was locked down. And I haven't found out exactly for sure because they can't disclose it, but I'm almost certain they had to pay to get their system back. That's not necessarily cyber warfare, but cyber warfare is happening. And I listened to conversations where maybe it's time to look at, and those that understand our military background, the Geneva Convention, and what is ethical and unethical when talking about modern warfare. There are significant ethical dilemmas related to, and think about this, state-sponsored hacking and offensive cyber operations. If the nation that you live in and the army that you're within, if they're asking you to hack, is it ethical? You have to ask those questions. And I can tell you that there's really no global standard for what's ethical and what's not. And you guys, as young professionals, if there's any ROTC in the world, you're going to experience this shift, and you'll probably see some, not probably, you will see a lot of change in this arena when it comes to cyber warfare. And that's the last point of this one. It is going to be important to have international cooperation and agreements to address these significant ethical challenges. And I've got about 2 slides left, and then I want to open it up to questions and have some conversation as best we can with this modality. Social engineering. How this is tough for me because I always like to ask questions of students. What do you know about social engineering? But I'm just going to keep rolling with this. Social engineering and its role in cyber attack, it's significant. So social engineering, you can almost see, again, it's that modern battlefield. And there was actually just a segment, you can watch it on 60 Minutes this last Sunday, that specifically talked about how Cuba has used social engineering to spy on the US. So that's your homework for this section. Go watch that 60 Minutes episode on Cuba. I had no idea, and I was blown away. And it talked about how they had spies who really used old school, what would be considered old school tactics, building relationships with people, having conversations, just gleaning information through social engineering, and then using it to thwart cyber attacks on the US. So there are significant ethical considerations related to how individuals can be manipulated for nefarious purposes. We need to raise the importance of this and keep this at the forefront of all of our minds when talking about the modern battlefield. So I'm the one saying, yeah, the modern battlefield is through our information, is through the internet, it's through the web, but also a lot of the tactics used in this arena have been going on for a long time. So we need to keep that at the front of our mind also. So what's your responsibility? And I think I'm doing pretty good on time. What's your responsibility as a future cybersecurity professional? I'll go back to the beginning of this conversation. And that one for me is going to be really important for you, is to know yourself, to know your ethical moral compass, to know what you're going to be willing to do and not to do. And then I always like to say, when students graduate, like you guys just graduated, ours is coming up, it's really exciting, and you're going to go out and you're going to apply for that job you really want. Don't be too excited. Go into it with your eyes wide open. Know what the organization's code of ethics is. At some level, it needs to align with yours, because if it doesn't, right? And I say this, certainly in my time at Central Washington University, which I think I'm going on 13 years, there's never been one scenario where it's been so big of an out of alignment that I've been like, I can't work for this organization anymore because their ethics are so far out of line with mine, right? There's been times where it's been a little like off, and I'm like, but it's never been so bad where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. It might happen for you. You need to know yourself and what you're willing to accept with your own moral compass and ethics, and falling in line with you as a future cybersecurity professional. There are many organizations that you can become part of to help you with that. So it's kind of that basic thing of having your own professional integrity, confidentiality, and honesty. And then there are laws that now protect whistleblowers, right? And it's that ethical dilemma of, should I say something or shouldn't? And I'm not here to decide how an individual goes about that, because there are a lot of different ramifications can come out of that for you as an individual, in your personal life, in your public life. But it might be the scenario where you say, you know what, I can't witness what this organization is doing and not let someone know. So in closing, as I've talked about, and I want to stress the importance of, this is a highly important area, ethics within cybersecurity. When we have strong ethical cybersecurity professionals, individuals are safer, organizations are safer, and societies are safer. So I want you, as you move forward through the rest of these workshops, and for you as you transition from being a college graduate to a professional, to really just think about how you can apply ethical principles in your future careers in cybersecurity. I'm running a little bit ahead, but I'm open up. That's all I have for this one, and I'm open to any questions you have on the content I presented.
Yeah, great. Thank you, David. All right, you've got questions. Got plenty of time, so let's take advantage of that. Maybe get a little spirited debate going. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to ethics. So, unless I'm sure everyone in here doesn't share the same viewpoint on everything, so there's got to be, Has anyone here done any hacking on their own? Or does anyone have a friend who's done hacking?
Yeah, nice.
Fun or no? We've got a bunch of goody two shoes in here, I guess.
No, that's okay. You know, I mean, I always like to ask, about ethical dilemmas, and we could, if to maybe spur some conversation, for you guys. Well, let me ask you this: what is an ethical dilemma? Anyone who wants to answer, when you hear that, what does that mean? Yeah, go ahead. I see your hand.
Yeah, I think the first thing I think of is the problems that they come by that like challenge your beliefs, like challenge your ethics.
Yep. No, that's good. It's when something happens in your life and it causes you to go, oh, wait a second, that doesn't feel good to me. That doesn't feel like it's the right thing to do, right? Would you guys agree? That's kind of a basics on ethical dilemma. And so with that, what do you guys think are the ethical dilemmas you may be faced with as soon to be cybersecurity professionals? What do you worry about? This is where it's really hard to me, because if I was there, I'd be moving around the room. I'd be pulling answers out of you guys. So you got to help me out here. What do you think the ethical dilemmas will be that you'll be faced with? Go ahead. Yeah, you're fine. Please.
Uh, it isn't really specific, but like because I took an ethics class before, but it's like basically who I want to know who could I be potentially harming with the job that.
Yeah. No, that's good. You may be asked to develop a product, and as you're developing it, you might go, oh, wait a second, this, how could this affect the end user? And you might be faced with seeing that this might have a negative impact on a certain group of people or something. And the ethical dilemma for you as a future professional will be, and I'm smiling and I shouldn't be smiling, but you'll be like, oh, should I say something? Should I not? Should I just go with the status quo? And I would encourage you to, at minimum, have a conversation with someone about the implications of whatever it is that's being developing, whether it's a piece of software or policy or collection of data or storage of data. It'll be important for you to, what I like to say to students, I want you to be the person sitting in the room willing to raise the red flag and go, hey, you know what? I see this as a possible negative, and it might not be in line with a strong ethical value. Does that make sense? Yeah.
You had something, Caitlin?
I was thinking like the difference between having like considerations for like the company's private data versus like customer private data. So like, are you more concerned about the general public, or are you more concerned about like a company's data which might be worth more monetarily than like public data would be, but public data is a public safety interest?
Yeah, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're talking about the difference between public data in the public sphere and private sector?
Yeah, but like the dilemma between like, so like you have public users that aren't exactly informed about like the danger they're in, but then you also have like company information that might be worth a lot more monetarily than the public users stuff. So like, it's not public information, let's say there's a cyber attack, and you have the option to allow leak of data just because it's public and pay off like whatever the ransom was or not pay it. And if you're willing to put like the public at risk because they're not aware it's a risk, to save more company assets later, that's like the ethical dilemma there. Because like, let's say the company assets have something to do with like the government, right? It would be more beneficial to protect government information than the public information.
You have just described a perfect scenario where there's an ethical dilemma. And there could be different nuances, depending on what the data is, what is at risk, what, is there more good than harm to let the public know? So that's a great scenario of an ethical dilemma.
David, I think that, the person you were referring to earlier in your talk, that the whistleblower. I think you're
Yes.
thinking of Edward Snowden,
Say that again.
Edward Snowden.
That's him. Yep.
Yeah, maybe that'd be something to talk about.
Yeah, so he is currently in, oh my gosh, is he in Brazil? Someone could look it up. But the United States, I don't know how much you guys know about him, but he leaked classified information that he believed the US general public needed to know about what the US government was doing. He believed it was completely unethical. And literally now it's been over a decade. He lived in one country. He lived in one embassy in a foreign country for years. And then he was moved, and the US still wants him. And he just basically, this other country gave him a stay. They're not willing to extradite him. And all of this, again, there are people who believe that what he did was the right thing to do. There are some others who believed he needs to, if he gets back to the US, if the United States gets him back here, he'll be charged with treason and he could get the death penalty for what he did. But there are many who believe what he did was the right thing to do. So that's in a very short nutshell, the Edward Snowden, and you can look it up. It's a fascinating situation. Well, again, I really wish I could be there. Like was said at the beginning, Central is on a quarter system. So students here, we're at the tail end of our year. This is week 9. Next week is the last week, and then finals week, and then they graduate. So that's the quarter system we're on. Maybe next year I can find a way to get over there and physically be in front of you. But I appreciate the time I've had with you today. I love the CySER program, and it's a great opportunity for students to learn and have access to great networking opportunities. I'm huge on networking and amazing internship opportunities, which can easily translate into great professional career paths.
Right, well, thank you so much, David.
Yeah.
Thanks for a great talk.
Thanks for having me. Have a good rest of your day, you guys.
All right, you too.